Imagine a single highway that carries most of the food, electronics, and car parts for half the planet. Now just imagine that highway suddenly stops at one gate, and well, hundreds of cargo trains, worth billions, sit waiting on the track. That's exactly what happened. More than 300 China-Europe freight trains and tens of thousands of containers were stopped at a border, holding goods valued in the billions of dollars. Think of it like a major airport closing for a week. Flights don't just delay, whole factories can't get parts, supermarket shelves run low, and perishable food begins to spoil. Trains are the same, faster than ships but cheaper than air, and perfect for items that need to arrive in about 2 to 3 weeks. Electronics, auto components, solar panels, and even fresh dairy. When that rail lifeline paused, supply chains felt it immediately. Here's why you should care. This isn't a local problem. The China-Europe rail network connects 61 Chinese cities to 227 cities across 25 countries, carries hundreds of millions of dollars every day, and has moved more than 11 million containers to date. When one choke point clogs, the ripple effects reach from factories in Germany to grocery stores in Asia. In the next section, we'll step back in time, from ancient Silk Road caravans to the modern Belt and Road trains, to see how this route grew into a backbone of global trade and why stopping it mattered so much. Over 2,000 years ago, there was this dusty network of caravan trails that connected China to Europe. Traders carried silk spices and porcelain westward, while precious metals and glassware traveled east. You know, it wasn't just trade, it was an exchange of culture, technology, and ideas. That route became known as the Silk Road, and it was one of the most important arteries in world history. Now, if we fast forward to the 21st century, the same idea, connecting east and west, has been reborn, but instead of camels, we have high-speed freight trains. In 2011, the very first China-Europe freight train departed from Chongqing, China, and arrived in Duisburg, Germany. It was more than just a shipment of goods. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in global logistics, and then, just 2 years later, in 2013, China officially launched the Belt and Road Initiative, with these trains as one of its key pillars. So, why was this such a big deal? Well, because rail filled a gap that neither ships nor planes could fully cover. Shipping by sea is cheap but slow. It often takes over 40 days. Air freight is fast, but oh boy, it's extremely expensive. Rail sits right in the middle, about 20 days from China to Europe, at a fraction of the air cost. It became the perfect golden route for trade between Asia and Europe. And this revival wasn't symbolic, it was massive. Each year, more routes opened, more trains ran, and more cities joined the network. Within just over a decade, the China-Europe freight system became one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects on Earth, transforming the old Silk Road into a 21st-century economic lifeline. Today, the China-Europe Railway isn't just a single line, it's an entire web that stretches across the Eurasian continent. Picture, if you will, a map covered in glowing threads of steel tracks, linking China's industrial cities with Europe's economic centers. It's like a steel silk road, only faster, busier, and honestly, far more complex. This network now operates along 3 main transport corridors, the eastern, central, and western routes. Trains can depart from 61 major Chinese cities, from Chongqing, Xi'an, Chengdu, and Wuhan, and reach 227 cities across 25 European countries. That includes destinations like Warsaw, Hamburg, Madrid, and even London. One of the longest routes runs from Yiwu, China, all the way to Madrid, Spain, a journey of about 13,900 kilometers, or roughly 1/3 of the Earth's circumference. Despite the distance, the train takes just 18 to 20 days, which is less than half the time of sea transport. The scale is staggering. Since operations began, over 110,000 trains have traveled this route, carrying more than 11 million containers with goods valued at over $450 billion US. That's equivalent to the GDP of a medium-sized European country. For Europe, this has been a game changer. German cities like Duisburg became major logistics hubs. It's now called the world's China port on land. At its busiest, up to 70 trains a week move between Duisburg and more than 20 Chinese cities. Every shipment brings Chinese-made electronics, machinery, and textiles into Europe, and sends back industrial products like car parts, medical devices, and chemicals to China. But there's one country whose position made it absolutely essential: Poland. It became the central gateway, the junction where East meets West, and as we'll see next, that geographic advantage gave Poland both power and vulnerability, a role that would soon lead to crisis. If you look at the map of the China-Europe freight network, Poland sits right in the middle, a natural bridge between Asia and the rest of the European Union. Almost every train coming from China through Belarus must pass through Polish territory before continuing west. This makes Poland not just another stop, but the main entry point for nearly all rail trade between China and Europe. To put that in perspective, around 90% of all China-Europe freight trains travel through Poland, and nearly all of them pass through one small but incredibly important hub, the Małaszewicze terminal, located near the Belarusian border. This place might not sound famous, but in the logistics world, it's as vital as an airport runway. It handles about 350,000 containers every year and serves as the main point where trains switch gauges, from the wider tracks used in the east to the narrower European standard. Without this conversion point, trains simply can't continue. Because of this, Poland gained enormous economic benefits. Entire logistics towns grew around the railway warehouses, trucking companies, customs offices and local jobs all depended on the constant flow of trains. Every day, goods worth millions of dollars pass through Polish soil, giving the country a powerful position in the middle of the global supply chain. But that power also came with risk. When one country becomes a choke point in such a massive system, any disruption, political, military, or technical, can bring everything to a halt, and that's exactly what happened in late 2025, when Poland made a sudden decision that shocked both Europe and China. In the next section, we'll look at the chain of events that led Poland to abruptly close all its border crossings with Belarus, and how, within days, hundreds of trains carrying billions in goods were stranded. It started with something that had nothing to do with trade, at least not on the surface. Around September 10th, Poland's military detected several Russian-made drones entering its airspace from the direction of Ukraine. Although the number was small and no serious damage occurred, the incident sent a chill through Warsaw. Only days later, Russia and Belarus announced a massive joint military exercise right along the Polish border. Nearly 100,000 troops, tanks, and even nuclear strike simulations. For Poland, this wasn't just a military drill, it looked like a warning. Fearing escalation, the government made a bold move. It closed all road and rail border crossings with Belarus, officially citing, citizen safety. What happened next was chaos. Overnight, more than 300 freight trains traveling between China and Europe came to a complete standstill at the border. Tens of thousands of containers, loaded with electronics, car parts, solar panels, and even perishable goods were obi stanspire. Sui dandao beacher stengser ser bar. Chi dar dan pom aubi bar. Sundan oi inlan stengsherm dan bamstan bolbo. The estimated value of these stuck shipments, over $320 million in cross-border e-commerce alone. Imagine a conveyor belt running 24/7 suddenly stopping mid-motion. Warehouses filled up, trucks waited endlessly, and companies scrambled to reroute urgent cargo. Inside Poland, the logistics sector was hit especially hard. More than 20 major logistics firms had to suspend operations, and the Małaszewicze terminal, usually humming with activity, fell silent. The country was losing an estimated $12 million per day in warehousing and transport downtime. It took about 2 weeks, until September 25th, for Poland to finally reopen the border, but the damage had already been done. Trade flows were disrupted, supply chains shaken, and global businesses suddenly realized how fragile this so-called Iron Silk Road really was. So the big question became, why would Poland take such a drastic step, knowing it would also hurt its own economy? The answer lies not just in security fears but also in politics and power games behind the scenes, which we'll explore in the next section. On the surface, Poland's explanation sounded simple: security concerns after drones and war drills near its border. But if we look closer, there was a lot more going on beneath the surface. The decision to seal all crossings with Belarus wasn't just about safety. Since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, Poland has become one of the West's most important logistics and military support hubs. The city of Reshape, for example, has been called Ukraine's lifeline, a staging ground where NATO and Western aid flow into Ukraine almost daily. Poland's importance to NATO has skyrocketed, and it's now seen as a frontline state between Europe and Russia. At the same time, Poland has been asking the European Union for a massive €40 billion defense subsidy to strengthen its eastern border, closing the crossings with Belarus, right after Russia and Belarus announced military exercises, may have been a political signal. A way to show the EU and NATO that Poland is serious about security and deserving of more financial and military support. In short, Poland's move was both a reaction and a message to Russia that it won't tolerate threats, and to the West that it's a loyal shield against Moscow, and should be funded like one. But that decision came with serious trade consequences. By shutting down the Belarus crossings, Poland unintentionally cut off 90% of China-Europe freight traffic, paralyzing a supply route worth tens of billions. For years, Poland saw its geography as an advantage, the gatekeeper of Eurasian trade. But this time, that same geography turned into a vulnerability. And China took notice. Within days of the shutdown, Beijing moved swiftly to test backup routes that could bypass Poland altogether, a move that could permanently shift the balance of Eurasian logistics. In the next section, we'll explore how China responded, the 3 new corridors it's developing, how they work, and why they might one day make Poland's rail dominance a thing of the past. When the border closure hit, China didn't waste time waiting for things to go back to normal. Instead, it activated a plan it had quietly been preparing for years, a series of backup transport corridors designed to keep trade moving no matter what happens in Eastern Europe. These new routes are reshaping the entire map of Eurasian logistics. The first and fastest to respond was the Middle Corridor, officially known as the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. This line starts in China, runs through Kazakhstan, crosses the Caspian Sea by ferry to Azerbaijan, then moves through Georgia and Turkey, finally entering Europe through the south. It completely avoids both Russia and Poland. During the Polish shutdown, China immediately diverted trains to this corridor. At its peak, it was moving over $45 million worth of goods every single day. Traffic along this line has exploded. In just the first 9 months of 2025, 229 trains used the Middle Corridor, a 28-fold increase from the year before. China now plans to boost its capacity to 10 million tons annually within 2 years, making it the second main artery of the China-Europe trade system. The second route is far to the north, the Arctic Passage. In partnership with Russia, China is opening a new Arctic shipping line that links its ports like Ningbo and Shanghai to northern Europe through the icy northern seas. This route can cut transport time from China to the UK or Netherlands to about 18 days, nearly half the traditional sea route. It's risky due to ice and harsh weather, but it gives China another powerful alternative for moving goods quickly and cheaply. Finally, there's the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway, which is, currently under construction. This 523-kilometer route will run from Kashgar in China's Xinjiang region, through the mountains of Kyrgyzstan, and into Uzbekistan, connecting with other southern rail lines that reach Turkey and beyond. It bypasses both Russia and Poland completely, cutting the journey by 900 kilometers, saving 7 to 8 days, and reducing shipping costs by more than 30%. Construction officially began in 2024 and is scheduled for completion by 2031. All of this means one thing: the balance of Eurasian trade is shifting. The southern routes, once seen as secondary, are now booming. In just 1 year, their share of China-Europe freight rose from 18% to 31%, while Poland's share is expected to drop by about 15%. China's message is clear: no single country will ever again be able to choke off its trade lifeline. But what do these new routes mean for Europe, for Poland, and for the future of global trade itself? That's what we'll explore in our final section. Poland's border shutdown was temporary, but its impact could last for years. What seemed like a short-term safety measure has forced China, Europe, and the rest of the world to rethink how global trade is structured. The incident exposed a harsh reality. When one country controls a critical choke point, the entire system becomes fragile. In the short term, Poland suffered heavy economic losses. The Małaszewicze terminal sat nearly idle, 20 logistics companies were forced to suspend operations, and the local economy lost millions every day. For a country that had built its growth on being the gateway to Europe, the shutdown showed how quickly that advantage can turn into weakness. Meanwhile, China proved it could adapt fast. By activating the Middle Corridor and pushing forward with the Arctic Route and Central Asia Railway, Beijing showed it's no longer dependent on a single route, or on Poland. These new lines will take time to mature, but once they do, the flow of goods could permanently shift southward, and that would mean fewer trains, fewer jobs, and fewer investments passing through Eastern Europe's traditional hubs. For Europe, this is a wake-up call. The continent's industries rely on steady, predictable logistics, from car factories in Germany to supermarkets in France. Disruptions like this show that global trade isn't just about economics anymore, it's also about geopolitics, security, and trust. The bigger picture? We're watching a new phase of the Silk Road unfold, one that's no longer defined by geography alone, but by strategy and resilience. The next decade will likely see multiple iron arteries connecting Asia and Europe, not one dominant route, but several competing corridors that balance speed, safety, and sovereignty. So, what started as a border closure might end up reshaping the future of global logistics. As one door closes, others are being built, across seas, deserts, and mountains. The question now isn't if trade will flow, but where it will flow next. If you found this story insightful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll keep following China's new trade corridors and the countries racing to control the next Great Silk Road.